Someone like you is my brother's wife? You should release him. I had thought I was getting along with my sister-in-law, but she showed her true colors when we were alone. I was taken aback by her drastic change in attitude, but I realized that this must be her true nature. My name is Jennifer, I'm 30 years old. It's been 4 years since I married my husband, Michael, who's 2 years older than me. We met through work and initially lived just the two of us. However, after my father-in-law passed away 2 years ago, we started living with my mother-in-law. I suggested this because I thought it would be tough for her to live alone, and we lived too far away to come quickly if something happened. Besides, my mother-in-law had quite a fortune, both from her own assets and the inheritance from my father-in-law. So there was also the worry that she might fall victim to a scam. Michael was concerned as well, and since the commute from his mother's place was no issue, we decided to move in with her. Our relationship with my mother-in-law was already good, so I wasn't worried, but living together turned out to be even more comfortable than I'd expected. We had similar hobbies and got along even better than before since we both were indoor types who liked the same things. So we enjoyed our time at home together. Perhaps because of this, my mother-in-law seemed happier and laughed more often, which Michael was also pleased to see. After moving in, I began to do housework and also started a part-time job at a local children's facility. It was a part-time gig about 3 times a week, but being around those energetic kids seemed to uplift my spirits too. Since moving in, my days have been more fulfilling than ever. I think living together was the right choice, but there was one problem. My sister-in-law, Emily, who's the same age as me. Emily was already married and out of the house when I married Michael, so I only saw her about once a year. When it was just the two of us, she often made snide remarks. Before, when there were others around, her attitude towards me was polite, so until then, I had thought we could be friends. The first time Emily directed her malice at me, I was dumbfounded. Since then, I found her unpleasant, but since we rarely met, I didn't think much of it. However, now that we were living in the same house, we saw each other often. Emily didn't live nearby, but she had been coming over almost every weekend even before. She'd have lunch and sometimes stay for dinner. Although she had her own family, I couldn't help feeling it was presumptuous, but my mother-in-law, being wealthy, didn't seem to mind. And while Emily was mean to me, she didn't act that way in front of my mother-in-law or Michael. For them, she was still their adorable daughter and sister. Especially Michael and Emily, who shared a love for outdoor activities since childhood and got along very well due to similar interests. I couldn't bring myself to tell my mother-in-law and Michael that Emily disliked me. Hey, I'm back. Oh, Jennifer. Could you take care of my children for me? So, I ended up looking after her children while she spent time with Michael and my mother-in-law. Emily seemed to love her family, and perhaps because of my good relationship with them, she didn't take kindly to me, always finding chores for me to do. She never forgot to sneak in a mean comment in a whisper. I've got 2 children and parenting is tough. You should be grateful I'm giving you this chance to practice. Emily would come over almost without fail on weekends, knowing that at her parents' home. She could take a break from childcare and hand it off to me, acting as if she was doing me a favor. Her children were a bit chubby and rambunctious, and while I didn't mind looking after them, I was fed up with the constant snide remarks. I wanted to snap back, but I held my tongue in front of her children. Since Emily was always smiling on the surface, any retort from me could make me seem like the villain instead of her. So, I kept my replies safe and stayed quiet. To outsiders, Emily and I appeared to be chatting happily, leading my mother-in-law and Michael to comment on how well we got along, to which I could only respond with a vague smile. In this close-knit family, I couldn't just say, Emily has a bad personality. And because I never fought back, Emily became more emboldened to bully me. It's good that you can practice parenting now. Make sure you do it properly, okay? And you're not just leaving all the housework to mom, right? Since you're living together, you should do it perfectly. Especially after my mother-in-law, who seemed so happy to do crafts together, it felt all the more like she was snapping at me out of irritation. Sucking up to mom, you're such an old-fashioned woman. It seems my sister-in-law believes that I have a better relationship with her mother than she does. Maybe it's because our hobbies, as well as our personalities, are similar, but I feel calm when I'm with my mother-in-law. She feels the same way, and my sister-in-law doesn't like that we get along so well, so she complains to me. Every time we meet, she always has a snide comment for me, but I just let it slide without provoking her. It felt like a child's tantrum even though we're adults, so I never got down about her sarcastic remarks. Sometimes I do housework better and faster than she does, so her complaints often sound like sour grapes. Lately, however, the comments have started to focus on the fact that I don't have kids yet. From this point on, I couldn't brush off her snide remarks as easily. It's been about 3 years since you got married, right? Why no baby yet? My sister-in-law, with 2 children, would smirk as if her position was superior to mine because I had none. Children are gifts, they're not about timing. I was concerned about not having children, so I tried to act unaffected in front of her, but it was disheartening inside. I work part-time at a children's facility and am involved with kids a lot, but I still wish I could have my own soon. When she brings up children, I can't come back with a clever retort like I used to. She just smirks triumphantly at me. Now into the 4th year of marriage. I've been continuously bothered by my sister-in-law's comments about not being able to have a baby, so I decided to visit a doctor. Her words had made me anxious about possibly being infertile. I've been consulting with my husband more, and he's been reassuring me that there's no need to worry. I'd be happy if we had kids, but the most important thing is that you're with me. There's no need to rush. He also said, let's work on having children together. That made me feel like I had met a good man. My husband's support meant that, although I felt anxious because of my sister-in-law's mean comments, I didn't take it too seriously. We went to the hospital for tests, thinking it would be nice to get checked out, just to be sure. But we were in for a shock with the unexpected results. What? No way! I had to ask several times to make sure it wasn't a dream, but I almost burst into tears when I realized it was real. I was actually pregnant, about 2 months along. My menstrual cycle often fluctuates, so I just thought it was late this time, but I never imagined I was pregnant. I had thought that I might be infertile, so this news was incredibly welcome. I had no typical pregnancy symptoms, so the unexpected result surprised me, but my husband and I were delighted. I was more smiley than before we went to the doctor, and when we got home, I shared the news with my mother-in-law, and the 3 of us celebrated together. I stroked my still flat belly, conveying my happiness to the baby that was going to be born. With this news, all my previous anxieties vanished, and I eagerly awaited the birth of my baby. As for my sister-in-law's reaction, she continued her sarcasm when it was just the 2 of us. Maybe it was because the content of her sarcasm decreased, or perhaps she didn't like seeing me so consistently happy about my pregnancy, but she seemed out of sorts. To me, excited about the baby, her sarcasm felt like a gentle breeze, not bothering me at all. However, at the next checkup, I was devastated to learn I had miscarried. What? Why? I asked the doctor, nearly crying. I had already been thinking a lot about parenting methods and things I wanted to do with the child, looking forward to the birth, so the miscarriage was unthinkable. I had researched pregnant life and didn't recall doing anything that could have caused a miscarriage. The shock of the miscarriage and the self-blame were almost crushing. The doctor explained that early miscarriages are relatively common. Sometimes due to chromosomal abnormalities, they can happen even when there is nothing wrong on the mother's side. I was told not to dwell on it too much, but I couldn't help it. I had been longing for a baby, so when I finally got pregnant, I was over the moon. But after suffering a miscarriage, the joy I had been feeling until then turned into a profound shock that left me deeply saddened. My husband and mother-in-law were worried and tried to cheer me up, but because I had been so looking forward to having a baby, I found it hard to bounce back, and couldn't manage to return to my normal routine. Moreover, my sister-in-law's sarcasm seemed to intensify after she heard about the miscarriage, deepening my depression. What on earth did you do to miscarry? You're not cut out to be a mother. And once you have one miscarriage, aren't you likely to never have children? What's the point of being married if you can't have a baby? She would say these cruel words with such glee, it was clear she enjoyed hurting me. Because of this, I began to despair that I might never be able to have a baby. Normally, I would have snapped back at her, but I was so down that I just took it all by myself. I tried to act normal at my part-time job, but even the kids there could tell I wasn't my usual self and expressed their concern, which only made me feel worse. I knew I couldn't go on like this, yet I couldn't shake off the feeling of being listless and devoid of energy. This distraction may have led to me falling down the stairs on my way to work, resulting in an injury that required hospitalization. I tumbled and bruised myself all over, fracturing my right arm and leg severely. Thankfully, a passerby called an ambulance, and I ended up being admitted to the hospital for a month. I felt terrible for worrying my husband and mother-in-law, who came to the hospital looking so concerned. We were afraid you had gotten reckless because you were so down. It's a relief you're fine. You've been losing so much weight, and now an injury on top of that. We were so worried. Seeing their tearful, worried faces, I realized just how much concern I had caused them. I had lost my appetite and weight from all the distress, which only added to their worries. It finally hit me just how neglected my body had become, not just from the injury, but from lack of care in general. I had forgotten to look after my skin and hair because I had no appetite. However, their words because of my injury made me decide to change my mindset. I'm sorry for worrying you. But I won't be down anymore. I'll recover from this injury quickly, I declared with newfound energy in my voice. Saying it out loud seemed to boost my spirits even more. Though the injury was unfortunate, it helped me to finally start moving past the trauma of the miscarriage. I was fortunate to have a private room in the hospital, which allowed me to rest peacefully. Thanks to my mother-in-law who generously covered the extra cost for it. The facilities were quite comfortable, which made my stay much easier. The beautiful flowers brought by my husband and mother-in-law also brightened up the stark white room. Since my dominant arm was out of commission, they often visited to keep me company and brought things I could enjoy without using my right arm. I started practicing writing with my left hand, and although it was inconvenient due to my injury, I was able to spend my time comfortably. My co-workers from the part-time job also visited, and the children sent a card with their clumsy handwriting saying, "Get well soon," which warmed my heart. The thought of showing everyone a healthier me after getting out of the hospital filled me with vigor. However, the one thing that still caused me stress was when my sister-in-law visited alone. She would never say anything mean when others were around, but alone in the room with me, she could be quite nasty. With no way to escape in the private room, I felt trapped. It didn't feel right to call for a nurse for such matters. So I just had to endure her snide remarks until someone else came or she decided to leave. She would often come just to deliver her unpleasant comments, which made me wonder if she had too much free time on her hands. But once, when I pretended to be asleep, she left soon after arriving, so I began to fake sleep whenever she was expected to visit, which thankfully reduced the number of her nasty comments. Finally, the day came when I was set to be discharged. You're gonna be out soon. We were thinking of throwing a little celebration party for you at home once you're out. What do you think? My husband and mother-in-law suggested excitedly. Wow, I can't wait, I replied, genuinely touched by their thoughtfulness. Emily will be happy to hear about your recovery. She's been worried about you. My mother-in-law said that, which meant even Emily would be there. It made me feel a bit disappointed. But my in-laws were oblivious to Emily's treatment towards me, so I couldn't really express my concern. I wasn't thrilled about my sister-in-law coming over, but I figured as long as I wasn't alone with her and stuck close to my husband and mother-in-law during the party, it would be okay. When I got home from the hospital, the house was already festively decorated with bright, colorful flowers, which lifted my spirits for the first time in a while. The table was full of delicious-looking food, some cooked by my mother-in-law and some bought from stores. Right when everything was almost ready, my sister-in-law arrived with a big bag in tow. "Sorry I'm late." "Congratulations on your discharge, Jennifer," she said with a perfect smile, and I thanked her with a smile of my own. Despite being taken aback by her previous snide remarks in my hospital room, I was amazed at how amazing her acting skills were. We all sat down, glasses filled with drinks in hand. "Here's to Jennifer's discharge." Michael toasted, and we started our meal. I didn't drink alcohol because of my injury, but the other three were pouring it liberally. Especially my sister-in-law, who brought her own and drank generously without bothering me, which made me feel relieved that the meal would go smoothly. Even with my right hand out of commission, I managed to eat by myself thanks to the easy-to-use utensils my mother-in-law had prepared for me. And my left-handed skills had improved. As the food started to dwindle and we were about to wrap up, my sister-in-law handed me a gift. "Oh, I almost forgot. This is for your discharge. Open it when you're alone." She gave it to me with a flushed, drunken face. "Thanks so much." She had a lot of baggage considering it was just alcohol, but I never expected that my sister-in-law would have the idea of celebrating my discharge from the hospital. I was surprised that she'd thought to give me a discharge gift, as it had not crossed my mind she would do something like that. "Wow, a discharge gift? That's sweet. Thanks," Michael said, sounding impressed and a bit tipsy. My mother-in-law smiled happily at what seemed like a caring and close-knit family scene. After that, my sister-in-law excused herself to use the bathroom before heading out. My mother-in-law and Michael told me to take it easy and sit while they started cleaning up. With my injury, I took their advice and sat on the couch, looking at the present she'd given me. It wasn't very heavy, wrapped in flower-patterned paper with an orange ribbon, which was a cheery combination. However, I had my doubts. It was unusual for my sister-in-law to give me a gift. And her whispering, "Open it when you're alone," sounded downright suspicious. With her out of the room, I decided to open the present right away. Inside, I found items that were peculiar to receive as a present for my situation, which made me pause in confusion. "What is this?" I exclaimed, dropping the gift in shock. "What's wrong? What happened?" Michael and my mother-in-law rushed over, confused as they looked at the dropped present I was pointing at. "This." I didn't think I could explain it well, so I pointed to the present I had dropped. Then, they looked at it curiously and seemed just as confused as I was. Inside were baby items and craft supplies. Sure, I hadn't given up on the idea of having children one day, and I did enjoy crafting. But it had only been 6 months since my miscarriage, and with my injury, I couldn't even do crafts if I wanted to. The contents were so mismatched for a discharge gift. Giving baby items to someone still recovering from a miscarriage and an injury felt like a deliberate insult. Had I not been on the path to recovery, seeing those baby items could have devastated me. They were also confused because it was not intended to be given as a congratulations on my discharge from hospital, considering my situation. The perplexity turned to anger when we found a message card inside. It should have contained uplifting words, but instead, it was filled with malice from my sister-in-law. "A useless wife should just leave. Try having kids or doing crafts if you can." "Huh? What?" At first, they were both stunned into silence, perhaps because they had thought my sister-in-law and I got along well. But it wasn't long before they started to get angry about what Emily had done. Just then, Emily came back from the bathroom and entered the room, which led my husband Michael to confront her. "Hey! What were you thinking giving this to Jennifer?" he demanded, his voice thundering in sudden anger. Emily looked confused at first, but upon seeing the gift wrap in Michael's hand, she seemed to realize what had happened. "Huh? You opened it? I told you to look at it when you were alone." However, whether it was because she was drunk or just didn't care, Emily didn't seem the least bit sorry and instead complained to me. Michael's anger only grew at her attitude. "How could you give such a thing? What were you thinking?" But Emily, undeterred and as if it was the most natural thing to say, retorted. Well, it's pointless to have a wife who can't have kids, who's hurt and lost her worth, who can't do anything right. You should just divorce her and marry someone better. Despite Michael's intense shouting, Emily remained calm and continued to insult me. She even went as far as to tell Michael, "I can introduce you to someone nice." Delighted with her own suggestion, Emily started laughing out loud. Michael, red-faced and fists clenched, seemed too furious to speak. In the midst of this, we heard my mother-in-law Jennifer's sigh. Then my mother-in-law, who appeared to have calmed down, said softly, almost to herself, "I'm going to cut ties with you." At the word cut ties, Emily looked at me triumphantly, mistaking my mother-in-law's intent as agreement with her. "That's right. We don't need someone like her in the family," she said and started laughing again, but she froze at my mother-in-law's next words. "I'm cutting ties with you, Emily." "What?" Emily's confusion was evident, and suddenly she seemed to sober up and began to panic. "Why? We're family, right? If anyone should be cut ties, it should be Jennifer, not me." Emily protested, unable to accept the idea of being disowned, but my mother-in-law continued firmly. "Someone who cannot think of others' feelings, who hurls such malice, is not our family. Don't bother me again because I won't be buying any of your husband's products anymore. That'll hurt us. Your buying affects my husband's sales." Emily's husband was in sales, and thanks to Jennifer often obliging Emily's requests, she regularly purchased the products he sold, which were not commonly bought due to their high price. Emily cried and pleaded as stopping these purchases would impact her husband's performance. "Stop it! We're family. Think of my children, they'll suffer too. You're no sister or family of mine anymore. Don't show up in front of me again." In his rage at Emily's insults towards me, Michael dragged her out, along with her belongings, and locked her out of the house. They ignored her knocks and pleas to be let back in. She lingered outside for a while but eventually left, presumably going back to her own place. Later on, Jennifer informed Emily's husband that she would no longer purchase his products, explaining the recent events. This led to Emily being reprimanded severely. She had been a homemaker receiving an allowance from her husband, which now seemed to have been cut off. The lack of spending money and the stern treatment from her husband seemed to have left her distressed, causing her to act out, making her increasingly unwelcome among her own parents and family. It's obvious that being mean or harassing others will get you disliked. I no longer meet with Emily, but I hope she takes this opportunity to reflect and change. Afterwards, Emily persistently tried to contact Michael and Jennifer, but they soon blocked her calls. They even went as far as to cut ties with her. Michael and my mother-in-law also apologized to me for not realizing sooner how Emily had been treating me. In turn, I apologized for not confiding in them about it. Once Emily was out of the picture, I stopped being harassed and, free from stress, my injuries healed, and I was able to return to work cheerfully. The children were delighted with my return, and that made me happy. 2 years later, I finally had my baby I had longed for, and I was moved to tears. While I'll never forget my first baby, I'm determined to cherish and care for my baby.
"I'm offering to pay for a settlement. So, let's settle this. How much do you want?" The moment she entered the hospital room, these shocking words left me momentarily dumbfounded. "What did you say?" "Nellie, what did you just say?" "It's exactly what it sounds like. What do you mean? Please answer me." The cruel treatment we had endured, which could have turned into a major issue if not handled carefully. To think she would offer money for a settlement after such an act. How much more must she belittle me? No, us, before she's satisfied. I have no intention of agreeing to such a ridiculous proposal. Nellie, you need to take appropriate responsibility. What did you say? You're as impudent as ever. Don't push us too far. You won't like it if we get really angry. Barely containing my rage, I engaged in a verbal battle with these brazen mom friends and her husband. "I've heard everything." My husband cut in with a strong statement. Both the mom friends couple and I were taken aback by the fierce expression on his face that I had never seen before. Nellie, you really haven't changed since the old days. Always thinking you can solve everything with money. What's wrong with that? Everyone wants money, don't they? Exactly. That's how the world works. If we give her money, she won't complain. As the mom friends couple continued their aggressive tirade, my husband pointed his finger at them and declared, "Let's see then. If money really can solve everything, shall we put it to the test?" Intimidated by his proclamation, the mom friends couple gasped again, but left the hospital room hastily, throwing a parting shot. Just like the mom friends said, at some point, everyone desires money. Money is literally paper that can buy enjoyment and happiness, a kind of magic that exists only in this world. However, as my husband said, there are things that no amount of money can buy or resolve. Mom friends will soon come to realize this fact, combined with their attempt to easily take away the life within me. My name is Allison. I am 32 years old and 9 months pregnant. I have a husband, Basil, who is the same age as me and is eagerly awaiting the birth of our child in my womb. We wish to welcome the birth of our child peacefully, but reality isn't so accommodating, because there are people who are not happy about the birth of our child. The person causing this trouble is one of the mom friends, Nellie, a rotten connection from our high school days. Nellie, a senior of mine and Basil's in high school, came from a wealthy family that owned a major resort company. She was beautiful, academically and athletically talented, making her a Madonna-like figure in high school. However, spoiled by her parents since childhood, she grew up to be extremely selfish and attention-seeking. Her tendency to use money to get whatever she wanted made her infamous in a bad way. Nellie had her sights set on Basil. She made aggressive confessions and repeatedly flaunted money to get him to be her boyfriend. Basil, weary of Nellie and genuinely fond of me from the start, chose me over her. This did not sit well with Nellie, and from that moment, I became her target. "You! A plain Jane like you doesn't suit Basil. Give him to me. Now! Right now!" "But, Nellie, I'm prettier than Allison, Basil. Look, I've got money too." "Nellie, could you please stop that?" So, during high school, Nellie harassed me with both words and money. I consulted teachers many times, but even they were silenced by Nellie's money-driven influence. Until Nellie graduated, Basil and I did our best to avoid provoking her. After her graduation, we didn't know what happened to her, but she stopped bothering us. We thought we had finally gotten rid of her, never imagining that this past would play a significant role in the current situation. Years later, when I thought we would never see Nellie again, she reappeared in our lives unexpectedly. Well, well, if it isn't Allison and Basil. I thought I wouldn't see you two poor folks for a while, and here you are, acting like you've got a proper family. Nellie, too, was married with a husband, Dee, and had children. Still living a lavish life, she and her family were draped in flashy, expensive brands, driving around in a high-end car. She behaved just like in high school, flaunting money among other mom friends, and even handed out cash as pocket money, forcing it on them. Most mom friends refused to take her money, but some, blinded by greed, accepted it and became her puppets. Using these bribed mom friends, Nellie began to harass Basil and me. "Allison, your outfit is as plain as ever. Haven't you been able to buy proper clothes since school days? Don't you dare walk proudly in front of me, you plain, poor thing. That side path is more fitting for your walks. This upscale cafe isn't a place for poor people like you and Basil. Here's some pocket money. Go have lunch at a common restaurant or diner instead." In this manner, Nellie continued to criticize Basil's and my appearance and behavior, and harassed us, just like in high school. by flaunting her money. The likes of her get more excited and pushy if you engage, so let her be until she tires of it. Initially, I wanted to argue against Basil's advice, wondering when she would tire, but I quickly swallowed those thoughts. As Basil said, engaging with such people only fuels their amusement and escalates their harassment. So we decided to deal with Nellie's harassment with minimal response. Then I became pregnant. When Basil learned of the pregnancy, he was genuinely delighted and declared his strong determination to be a father who wouldn't be ashamed. His resolve made me feel the need to live as a mother and as a person in a way that wouldn't be shameful for the child we were about to bring into the world. I just hoped Nellie wouldn't do anything, but reality wasn't so kind. 9 months into my pregnancy, while returning from shopping with my enlarged belly, I unfortunately ran into Nellie. "Oh, Allison? You've gotten quite fat since I last saw you. What have you been eating to get yourself into such an unsightly state, huh?" "This isn't about being fat. There's a baby in my belly. If you have no business, please leave me alone." Nellie seemed displeased with my response and circled around in front of me. "Your attitude has grown as big as your belly, huh? How dare a plain poor person like you get pregnant? It's outrageous and unacceptable." "I don't care what you think. I'm pregnant and want to give birth in Sandy." I tried to leave the situation peacefully, but this seemed to infuriate Nellie even more. "Wait, Allison! You've become too arrogant for your own good." As I hurriedly tried to leave, Nellie chased and grabbed me from behind. In the scuffle, her right arm, swung with momentum, hit my belly hard. I fell to the ground with a thud. I was left in pain, crouching on the spot. "My belly, it hurts! Help! Someone!" In my fading consciousness, I reached for my mobile phone in my pocket and hastily contacted Basil. To Basil, "Basil, the baby's in trouble." Leaving only those words behind, I lost consciousness. When I awoke, I was in a hospital bed, an IV in my arm, wrapped in an electric blanket. "Allison? Good, you're awake?" Familiar voices came from nearby. Turning my head, I saw Corey and Sandy, mom friends I was close with, beside my bed. "What happened to me?" "Oh, right, the baby?" "Don't, Allison. Don't strain yourself. You need to rest." I tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in my abdomen forced me back down. Corey and Sandy gently eased me back onto the bed. I was shocked to see my previously swollen belly now much smaller. After calling a nurse, I learned that I had gone into labor due to the incident and had an emergency C-section. The baby, still small and in an incubator, was healthy and unharmed. Basil, who had rushed from work after my call, was fuming with anger. After talking to Corey, Sandy, and my doctor, who had fortunately been nearby and called for help, I decided to rest and recover before visiting the baby, following Corey and Sandy's advice. But the next day, an unbelievable visitor came to my room. Nellie and her husband Dee, the very people responsible for my hospitalization. "You, Nellie? How dare you show up like this? What are you doing here?" Corey and Sandy, who had come to visit, glared at them, but they ignored them and approached my bed. Their entrance and attitude, after what they'd done, were incredibly rude. I frowned in disbelief. Then, the outrageous couple threw a shocking proposal. "Let's cut to the chase. How much do you want?" "What?" "We're offering to pay for a settlement. How much do you want?" My mind went blank, and I felt a chill. "What did you say?" "Nellie, what did you just say?" "It's exactly what it sounds like." "So what do you mean? Please answer me." After what they did to me and my unborn child, they think they can settle with money? How much more will they belittle me? Us? I have no intention of agreeing to such a ridiculous proposal. You, Nellie, need to take appropriate responsibility. I firmly refused. and Nellie and Dee responded with every insult they could think of. What? You're as impudent as ever. Don't make us angry. You won't like what happens if you do. There's nothing impudent about it. It's you who need to stop making a joke of us and taking us for fools. That's right, Nellie. Do you even realize what you've done? It could have been a serious matter if something went wrong. Nellie, there really was a baby in Allison's belly. You carelessly endangered both her and the baby. What are you talking about? We're trying to settle this with money. Aren't you grateful? You people. Didn't your parents teach you to know your place? We're saying let's settle this. Before we get really angry and make a big deal, just agree to the settlement. Corey and Sandy, backing me up, spoke out forcefully, but Nellie and Dee, angered, hurled insults at us all. In the midst of this loud argument, the door to the hospital room suddenly swung open. I've heard everything. Basil, with a calm yet intense voice, intervened. Corey and Sandy turned to Basil, surprised. Nellie and Dee, not expecting Basil to arrive, and confronted with his serious anger for the first time, were suddenly intimidated. Even I, having never seen Basil truly angry, was taken aback, along with Corey and Sandy. Basil walked up to Nellie and Dee, speaking quietly but forcefully. Nellie, you really haven't changed since the old days, always thinking you can solve everything with money. What's wrong with that? Everyone wants money, don't they? Nellie blanched at the direct confrontation. Indeed, everyone wants money, and I won't deny that. But there are things money can't buy, problems it can't solve. This incident is precisely that. No amount of money can make it forgivable. Thankfully, my daughter in the incubator is fine, but one wrong step and she might not have been in this world. Yet Nellie doesn't understand the gravity of what she did, and Dee probably thinks the same way. This makes it even more unforgivable, and I wish they hadn't mentioned a settlement so casually. I agree with Basil. If money could resolve everything, there would be no need for the police. So, once again, we will pursue this legally and demand responsibility. What? More impudent than ever today, huh? Everyone's happy if they have money, right? Exactly. That's how the world works. If you get money, you won't complain. Nellie and Dee, still defiant and hurling insults, didn't faze me anymore with their shallow, show-off lifestyle. Then Basil, pointing assertively at Nellie and Dee, declared, Let's see then. If money really can solve everything, shall we put it to the test? Huh? Stunned by Basil's meaningful challenge, Nellie and Dee were speechless. I too was left astonished. However, Nellie, with Dee by her side, wore a look of disdain and retorted to Basil. What are you talking about, testing? Are you stupid? What can poor people like you and Allison possibly do? With that dismissive comment, Nellie and Dee left the hospital room. Basil, what are you planning to do? Don't worry about anything, Allison. Leave it all to me. Saying this, Basil exchanged glances with Corey and Sandy, who nodded and reassured me that everything would be okay. Confused and still recovering from the surgery, I found it too difficult to argue or talk any further. So I decided to trust Basil and let him handle things, choosing to rest and recover instead. The next evening, Nellie stormed into the hospital again, visibly enraged. Are you there? I know it's your doing. Stop hiding and come out, you cowardly plain woman. Outside my room, Nellie argued with the nurses, yelling incomprehensibly. Basil, arriving for a visit after work, saw the commotion. What's going on now? Showing up at the hospital and causing a scene? Are you okay? He calmly asked. Nellie, redirecting her anger at Basil, snapped back. This mess at our house since yesterday? It's all your and Allison's doing. Bringing the police and lawyers into a simple mom-friends dispute. What were you thinking? Just a dispute, huh? Sleep talk should be saved for bed. Dealing with a crazy woman like you needs an effective approach. What? Explain yourself at the police station. This is disturbing the other patients. As Basil dismissed her, Nellie continued to shout and tried to approach my room, but was soon restrained by security guards, who had apparently arrived behind her. They escorted her out, her voice fading away. Then, the sound of sirens and more shouting indicated she was likely taken away in a patrol car Basil or the hospital had called. That night, incredibly, Dee called me. I'm divorcing that woman, and I won't bother you again. Don't drag me into this anymore. His sudden call, full of inexplicable and selfish remarks, was astonishing. A wife like her? A husband like you? I'll hear the details later. Please stop bothering me with your nonsensical and selfish claims. After he shouted something more, I hung up without a word and blocked his calls, finally embracing the peaceful rest I needed. Later, I learned that Corey's husband is a police officer, and Sandy's husband a newspaper reporter, both good friends of Basil and in close contact. After the hospital incident with Nellie and Dee, Basil immediately sought their help, and they agreed to assist. Corey and Sandy, also fed up with Nellie's behavior, offered their support for my revenge. First, with Corey's husband's assistance, Basil filed a complaint against Nellie for assault and battery, leading to her arrest. Subsequently, through lawyer Sandy, a discussion ensued, but Nellie shamelessly insisted she was not at fault. Corey countered this by presenting a recording of the conversation in the hospital room as evidence. Given Corey and Sandy's eyewitness testimonies at the scene of the assault, Nellie was found guilty and ordered to pay a substantial amount in damages. Sandy's husband reported the incident to his newspaper, and its publication not only impacted Nellie, but also her family's business severely. Furthermore, Nellie's parents, out of love for their daughter, had embezzled company funds to cover up her numerous misdeeds, leading to a loss of company credibility and financial distress. Dee, who had been misusing Nellie's financial influence at his company, was not well regarded by his colleagues. Eventually, word spread among his co-workers, and Dee was met with cold stares and whispered conversations. This led to the HR department deciding to transfer him to a regional office. Later, Nellie divorced Dee, and her parents abruptly disowned her, taking custody of their 2 children. Burdened with substantial debts, including the compensation payment, and ostracized due to her actions, Nellie struggled to find re-employment. Corey and Sandy mentioned that she is now living as a homeless person in a park, seen lining up for food at a volunteer soup kitchen. Dee, unable to bear the cold treatment and rumors, resigned from his company and fled. He was last seen boarding a plane to a remote location, and his whereabouts remain unknown. Several months after the incident, I was discharged from the hospital with my newborn daughter. We received a significant compensation payment from Nellie. My daughter has shown no lasting effects and is growing well post-discharge. Basil, along with Corey, Sandy, and other mom friends, are enjoying peaceful lives. Watching over my daughter's growth